We will move on to the statement shortly. Quietly and quickly. We come to the statement on Heathrow, and I call the Secretary of State, Heidi Alexander.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would like to update the House on the steps this government is taking to realise the benefits of expansion at Heathrow Airport, having invited proposals for a third runway earlier this year. Today, I am launching a review of the airport's national policy statement. Britain wants to fly, and this government will act to meet public aspirations. Our review of the AMPS will ensure that while we unlock long-term capacity for more flights at the nation's only hub airport, we will also meet our obligations to passengers, communities and the environment. Today is a step forward for UK aviation and infrastructure, supporting growth in the economy and enabling a modern, efficient transport system that harnesses international investment, boosts connectivity and strengthens UK competitiveness. We are committed to making a decision on a third runway at Heathrow within this Parliament, and we are clear on our ambition to see flights taking off on a new runway in 2035. We said we would get on with this, and we have. When the previous government set up the Davis Commission, it took them 5 years to publish the original draft AMPS. We'll get to the same point in 18 months, with the process completed by the end of 2026, showing our commitment to delivering progress swiftly but also robustly. When we say we back the builders, not the blockers, we mean it. But this is not a blank cheque. Expansion at Heathrow must minimise cost for passengers and customers. The taxpayer must not be expected to foot the bill. That is why the scheme will be privately financed, both the core project and the related infrastructure improvements. Extra staff and passengers must be able to get to and from the airport without turning the M4 and the M25 into Europe's largest car park. Crucially, the expansion must align with our legal, environmental and climate commitments. Starting the review of the AMPS is critical to delivering expansion and will provide the basis for decisions on any future planning applications. The world has changed since the last AMPS review in 2018 and when it was designated at that point. New environmental and climate obligations have been introduced and patterns of travel have changed. Stand in pretty much any UK airport this summer, though, and you will have seen the busiest summer on record. We could put our head in the sand and pretend that this isn't the case, but we would be doing a disservice to our economy and the next generation. That is why, in carrying out this review, we will consider how any proposed scheme must meet 4 clear tests: that it contributes to economic growth across the country, that it meets our air quality obligations, that it is consistent with our noise commitments, and crucially, that it aligns with our legal obligations on climate change, including net zero. We will seek the independent opinion of the Climate Change Committee, and I will be writing to them shortly to request this advice. Whilst a third runway at Heathrow has been factored into Carbon Budget 6, it is right that we update our modelling and seek the views of the CCC. Given the national importance of Heathrow, we will also consider naming the airport as critical national priority infrastructure, in line with our approach to low-carbon energy projects. We are further considering whether to name a statutory undertaker as an appropriate person to carry out the project under the Planning Act of 2008. Providing additional clarity to stakeholders and the local community. It is clear that this is a large and complex programme that requires a thorough and evidence-led approach. Over the coming months, my department will develop analysis on economic and environmental impacts of expansion. We will also undertake an appraisal of sustainability as required by statute, alongside a habitats regulation assessment and other necessary technical work. If amendments are needed to the AMPS as a result of the review, we expect to consult on an amended policy statement by next summer. Communities will be able to have their say, and we will shortly publish an updated stakeholder engagement approach to ensure transparency and fairness throughout the process. Madam Deputy Speaker, earlier this year, we invited potential promoters to submit proposals for delivering a third runway at Heathrow. 7 proposals were received and were considered by officials from the Department for Transport, from the Treasury, and expert financial and technical advisors. Following this assessment, 2 potential schemes remain under active consideration: a proposal from Heathrow Airport Limited and a proposal from the Aurora Group. We know we must provide as much clarity and certainty for communities, investors and users of Heathrow as soon as possible. So we are seeking further information on the 2 proposed schemes with a view to reaching a final decision on a single scheme to inform the remainder of the AMPS review by the end of November. When making this decision, we will consider the interoperability of the proposed scheme with its existing infrastructure, the plans for transport to and from the airport and associated road schemes, the land take and impact on surrounding homes and communities, the evidence that the scheme can be privately financed, and the economic benefits of the scheme. This government is committed to moving quickly, but we will also do this properly. To deliver the scheme on time, the government is also pressing ahead with a series of enabling reforms. The Planning and Infrastructure Bill will streamline the delivery of major infrastructure, including Heathrow. This includes faster consenting routes and more proportionate consultations. On judicial reviews, we have announced that we will work with the judiciary to cut the amount of time it takes for a review to move through the court system for national policy statements and nationally significant infrastructure projects. We are establishing the UK Airspace Design Service to deliver modernised airspace. This will initially prioritise airspace design for the London region, supporting both Heathrow and the wider network. This will also make flight paths more efficient, so planes spend less time over London. We will initiate slot reform to ensure future allocation maximises benefits of an expanded Heathrow, as well as approved growth at Gatwick and Luton for passengers, local communities and businesses. Expanding Heathrow will be one of the largest infrastructure projects in the UK. Rigorous and effective cost control will be essential to its success, both in minimising any impact on airline charges and costs to passengers and in maintaining credibility with financial markets. The government will therefore work with the Civil Aviation Authority to review the framework for economic regulation for capacity expansion at Heathrow, ensuring the model provides strong incentives for cost-effective delivery. We expect the CAA to publish a working paper in November with a view to this work completing next summer. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a landmark opportunity for Heathrow, for the aviation sector and for the UK economy. The government remains fully committed to ensuring the expansion is delivered in a way that is timely, cost-efficient and environmentally responsible. I commend this statement to the House.
I call the Shadow Transport Minister, Richard Holden.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'm grateful to the Secretary of State for her statement and also for advanced sight of it. Mr. Speaker, this statement should have been brought to the House months ago. The Secretary of State surely recognises that today marks a delay and an acknowledgement of that rather than the decisive move forward. The truth is that this whole process has come about it the wrong way round, with recent announcements on Gatwick and Heathrow not driven by planned or prepared work, but by a clear attempt to divert attention from the government's growing list of crises, scandals and cover-ups, rather than any clear plan for the future of British aviation. However, we on these benches nonetheless welcome the fact that the statement has finally been brought forward to the House, because both the aviation sector and passengers deserve clarity, as do local people who will be affected, and we hope that they will see sensible mitigations from these proposals. So can the Secretary of State also confirm what assessment the Government has undertaken so far of the total costs of Heathrow expansion, given that one of the central estimates now stands at almost £50 billion, excluding an extra potentially £10 billion of further surface access works? Those figures would quadruple Heathrow's current asset base, already responsible for some of the highest passenger charges in the world. And if Britain is to remain competitive on the global stage, these costs must be kept down, not driven up. Crucially too, how will the Government therefore ensure that these costs are minimised, not maximised, as I'm sure the Secretary of State, like me, does not want those costs directly passed on to airlines and then passengers in higher fees, because affordability must be at the heart of any credible aviation strategy. Maintaining affordable flights is crucial for passengers, so can the Secretary of State assure the House that the Heathrow expansion will not result in significant pass-through costs, especially given how this Government's rises in air passenger duty, the jobs tax and now real concerns over business rates will also affect the aviation sector? I understand too that the Chancellor has claimed a third runway will be operational by 2035, something that the Secretary of State has reflected today, and she wants to see spade in the grounds during this Parliament. Of course, we welcome reforms enabled to do that. These reforms, however, will not have any teeth unless the Government commits to backing our plan to scrap the Climate Change Act. Otherwise, Heathrow expansion will face judicial review after judicial review, bogging down the process, driving up costs and delivering further delay. Even Labour's Mayor of London has said that he won't hesitate to launch legal challenges against a third runway. So can the Secretary of State commit to ensuring that her own Labour colleagues, including those she worked for previously, and allies, will not be the ones who prevent this important project from ever seeing the light of day? Can she also commit to ensure that the associated roads and rail links to not just into London, but also to the south are included, so that expansion delivers genuine economic growth and connectivity for the whole of the United Kingdom? Madam Deputy Speaker, the Conservatives would end the constant threat of judicial review and eco-warfare to ensure that infrastructure across the country can finally be delivered on time and on budget and in Britain's national interest. It was great to hear her words on this from the dispatch box, but will these reforms she's talking about with the judiciary actually come into force before the decisions on Heathrow and the DCO are made, or will they be subject to the current situation we're facing? We on these benches recognise that greater competition is the most effective way to deliver value for money and reduce costs to consumers, and I am grateful that the Secretary of State for her statement acknowledges that Heathrow expansion must minimise costs, but the only way to achieve that is through real and genuine competition. Heathrow's current structure has the potential to create perverse incentives that reward higher spending rather than efficiency, pushing up charges for passengers and airlines. And I note that the commitment from the CAA's review into economic regulation will begin in November, but that review must look seriously and fundamentally about how to embed competition and reverse perverse incentives. So can I ask the Secretary of State how she and the CAA intend to bring competition to the heart of delivering this project? And will she commit to that review, she said before summer, or in summer next year? Will it be before the summer recess so this House will have time to scrutinise it too? While this Government continues to splurge cash, hike up taxes and debt and tie Britain in eco-warfare with their Green allies, only Conservatives would restore confidence, break that cycle and deliver a stronger economy with world-class aviation at its heart. Sadly, under this Government, taxes have risen to historic highs. They've imposed a punishing jobs tax, and borrowing has soared to the highest levels since 2010 outside the pandemic, with £100 billion now there in annual debt interest payments. A third runway alone will not shield the country from the consequences of Labour's economic mismanagement, but is a project that must be delivered correctly and responsibly, and must also put passengers at its heart.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm interested by the Right Honourable Gentleman's comments about our pace of delivery, and I roundly reject his criticisms on this. We are the party that are accelerating Heathrow expansion, today setting out this swift and robust review of the AMPS to help us determine applications swiftly. Previous work to get a final Airports National Policy Statement by the last government took more than 5 years. This government will do it 3 years faster, Madam Deputy Speaker. We are getting on with the job, taking the important and sometimes difficult decisions to get Britain building. And I gently remind him that when his great ally and mentor, Boris Johnson, was Prime Minister, he went to such lengths to duck decisions on this issue that he ended up in Afghanistan. Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman is absolutely right to care about consumers and cost control, and that's precisely why we are reviewing the AMPS and why we are starting the work via the Civil Aviation Authority on the model of economic regulation. I would say this to him: if we fail to plan for future capacity, prices will rise and choice will shrink. This review will be integral in keeping the UK competitive and connected by ensuring sufficient capacity, fair competition between global hub airports and sustainable growth. I agree with him that consumers deserve affordable fares and greener aviation, and that is what we are working to deliver. Madam Deputy Speaker, he also asks about climate change, service access, our reforms to judicial reviews. On service access, I can be clear with him that we expect this project and associated infrastructure improvements to be privately financed. Through the AMPS review, we will be looking holistically at public transport requirements, be that Southern Rail access, Western Rail access, how people get to and from central London. He will recall that in the spending review, we set out the biggest investment in London's transport for over 10 years, £2.2 billion, enabling TfL to buy new rolling stock on the Piccadilly line, 10 extra Elizabeth line trains, and we will work closely with our colleague, the Mayor of London and TfL, to ensure that appropriate infrastructure is in place. He talks about the changes that we are making to judicial review, and I would simply say this to him: we are acting where his government had their head in the sand. I am confident that the CAA will look carefully at competition issues in the work that they are doing. And I am also confident, Madam Deputy Speaker, ultimately I know that at Heathrow we could create 100,000 jobs through expansion. We could boost economic growth as well as opening up new opportunities for trade, tourism and travel. We will do this properly. That's what we're doing by launching the AMPS review today, and I look forward to answering further questions from other honourable members.
Select Committee Chair Ruth Cadbury.
Madam Deputy Chair, and I thank the Secretary of State for her statement today, and I look forward, hopefully, to the work she does on this AMPS to come to our committee in due course. Now, a third runway at Heathrow, combined with all of the other agreed or likely to be agreed expansions of capacity in London and South East airports, is an increase of 177 million passengers, 70% more than the number of passengers in London and the South East from 2024. So I look forward to the Climate Change Committee's response, because they said a 35% increase in capacity would be the maximum that would keep the UK compliant with our international legal commitments. But back to more specifics. In her statement, she says she seeks to minimise costs for passengers and customers, but given the cost of runway 3 will be between 25 billion and 49 billion, how exactly will that not pass those costs on to the airlines and therefore the passengers if the Treasury isn't going to fund those costs, which we know that they're not? And on surface access, ever since the expansion of the building of the 5th terminal, The local authorities all around Heathrow have been pushing for southern rail access to Heathrow. Heathrow Airport have long said and have clarified recently they will not pay the cost of southern rail access. So how does she expect that to be funded if the M25 and the M4 are not to ground to a halt, if passengers and workers from the west of the airport and south of the airport are going to be able to get in and out of the airport? I would like to ask her to answer the how. Thank you.
Marvellous. Secretary of State.
My honourable friend is entirely right to raise these issues, and they are matters that we will be giving very careful and thorough consideration to through the Airport's National Policy Statement review that will take place over the coming months. She refers to opinion that has been provided from the Climate Change Committee about capacity expansion. I would also say to my honourable friend, of course, that we are making very rapid progress in cleaning up the fuel that is used in planes, that we are we're taking huge efforts to reform our airspace so that we can have cleaner, more direct flights, and that the carbon intensity of flying has to come down if we are going to have more planes in the air. She is also right to highlight the importance of the regulatory model, and that is why we have asked the CAA to do this piece of work over the coming months, aligned with the review in the airport's national policy statement, and we will be saying more on that in due course.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Ollie Glover.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for her statement, which made the government's intent very clear to support this proposed Heathrow third runway. Although it was good to hear her recognise the complexity of all that will be needed to deliver it, including major diversionary works of two of the country's busiest motorways. And we here in the Liberal Democrats continue to support the right infrastructure in the right place, which is why we have always supported schemes such as East West Rail and Northern Powerhouse Rail. But it does need to be the right infrastructure to tackle the right problems. And there are many unanswered questions about Heathrow third runway. The New Economics Foundation has been very clear that in their analysis that the environmental impact of airport expansion will erode a lot of our carbon emissions reductions plans, and many studies have questioned the economic case for Heathrow. I'd also perhaps be interested to hear from the Secretary of State about the dangers of relying solely on the private sector to fund large schemes. That was the case for the Channel Tunnel, which remains an enormously underutilised asset, partly because of the costs that have resulted of the decision to only have it private sector funded. It's welcome that the Secretary of State has made her support for this subject to 4 tests, but I do detect perhaps a slight hint of cognitive dissonance and contradiction, given that at the same time the government is setting out timelines for delivering something that they say is subject to 4 tests. So can I ask her very specifically, she mentioned the Climate Change Committee and that she will hear its independent advice. I ask the Secretary of State, if the Climate Change Committee decides that the preferred option for Heathrow third runway is incompatible with our carbon emissions and our net zero targets, will she drop her support for this third runway?
Secretary of State.
Can I start by congratulating the honourable gentleman on his appointment? He refers to research that has been done by the New Economics Foundation, and I should be clear with him that this government is absolutely committed to reaching net zero for the whole economy by 2050, and that we will meet our climate change obligations as set out in the Climate Change Act. We've also been clear repeatedly that any airport expansion proposals will need to demonstrate that they contribute to economic growth and can be delivered in line with the UK's legally binding climate change commitment. We will be engaging with the CCC as part of the AMPS review. Heathrow is only one part of the process. Of course, the expansion of Heathrow, Luton, Gatwick and Bristol airports, it was factored in to Carbon Budget 7, and he will know that the government in the coming weeks will be publishing its updated delivery plan for carbon budgets 4 to 6. I don't think we should see economic growth and our climate change commitments as being inconsistent with one another, I believe we can go further and faster in terms of cleaner fuels and technological developments. But I am also clear that people want to fly, and I don't think this government should get on the wrong side of public aspiration.
John MacDonald.
Can I first of all express my sympathy for the Secretary of State? She knows from her past experience that this is like watching a political car crash in action, and it's been thrust upon her by the Chancellor, so I express my sympathy for that. Because she knows that Heathrow have made a clear commitment they're not going to pay for the infrastructure. She knows that landing charges will go up, so passengers will pay for it. And she knows there's no way we can meet our climate change targets if this goes ahead. So that's why I express my sympathy. She's been given an impossible task. I just want, from my specific constituency interest, as she will know because Heathrow's in my constituency, she mentioned that the stakeholder engagement process will be published shortly. Could she be a bit more precise, first of all, about that timescale, and also what measures will be included in that? Because the House does need to know that in my constituency, 4,500 homes will be demolished or rendered unlivable. 15,000 people will lose their homes. We'll lose 3 schools. Whole communities will go. So my constituents will want to know, want to ask the question, where are they going to live? Where are their children going to be educated? And what will happen to their overall community? We just need some certainty now, and the certainty from my point of view is to recognise that this is a white elephant. It's almost like watching HS2 all over again.
State.
I'm sure it won't come as a surprise to my honourable friend if I reject his characterisation of the work that I am doing. I see this as an opportunity, Madam Deputy Speaker, to improve our connectivity as a nation, to improve UK competitiveness, and to ensure that we are delivering for businesses and passengers all across the UK. I do understand why my honourable friend raises the interests of his constituents who live closest to the proposed expansion, and he asked me for more detail about the timeline of consultation going forward. If through the AMPS review we make changes to the AMPS, then there will be a consultation that is done on that next year, and we are working on a timeline that would see a new AMPS designated by the end of next year. But I do give him a commitment to meaningful engagement and consultation, and we will be setting out the document that I refer to in my statement, which is a new stakeholder engagement approach, so that people will be treated with fairness and we will be acting with transparency throughout this process.
Can I ask colleagues to keep the questions short so I can get everybody in? Lincoln Joel.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Whilst I sympathise with the member for Hayes and Harlington, my Spelthorne constituency is on the southern side of Heathrow Airport, and the residents of Stanwell Moor, some 520 homes, are half a mile away from the southern perimeter. They have put up with a lot, including appalling behaviour by Uber drivers, by holiday parking near them, and with noise pollution. Can I ask that the consultation approach directly engages with the people of Stanwell Moor, and that we baseline the situation today as regards air and sound pollution by really measuring it, so that we know the impact that is subsequently going to take place as a result of this airport expansion?
There will be a very thorough review of the noise requirements in the current AMPS and the mitigations that are currently set out in that document, and I can give him a commitment that will be meaningful engagement with his constituents.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can my right honourable friend confirm this is not a done deal? Will there be, as part of the NPS review process, full and independent analysis of economic costs and benefits, of environmental effects, and of demand in London and the South East, given airport expansion elsewhere? As she says, the world has changed since 2018. Can my constituents, who will be seriously and detrimentally affected by any further expansion of Heathrow, be assured the government has their best interests at heart?
Madam Deputy Speaker, we will do this properly, and as the Secretary of State for Transport and as someone who may ultimately be the decision maker on any future planning application, I assure my honourable friend that I will approach this issue with an open mind and will apply the highest standards of professionalism and probity to the process that I'm currently overseeing.
Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Egham in my constituency is 5 miles away from Heathrow, and it's not the fact that it's overflown that I want to ask about today. The Shadow Secretary of State for Transport visited the patch on Monday, and we waited 12 minutes while level crossing barriers were down in Pooley Green. Now, she didn't mention trains as part of the consultation. Is that going to be within scope? Because if the expansion does go ahead, we desperately need to deal with our level crossings and have better rail access from Egham to Heathrow to make this work.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do agree that we need to deal with the issue of level crossings on the rail network, and we will be looking holistically at rail requirements as part of the AMPS review.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for her statement this afternoon. And I'm pleased to hear that this will be a thorough and meaningful consultation, because even though my Vauxhall and Camberwell Green constituency isn't near the airport, we do, and constituents write to me on a regular basis, constituents from Camberwell, Stockwell and Brixton suffering from air pollution and noise pollution as well. The Secretary of State highlighted in terms of the infrastructure, and one of the key areas is around making sure more people are using public transport to Heathrow. And the reality is that some of the upgrades to the airport haven't had the funding over the many years. And as the Chair of the Select Committee highlighted, I just wanted to tease that out a bit more from the Secretary of State in terms of that private funding, because at the moment we have a number of cases where we see some developers committing to something at committee, but then the viability issue comes up and the money never seems to appear. So will she make sure that there is funding to secure the vital transport infrastructure to any new airports?
Secretary of State.
How people get to and from an airport is as important as the number of flights and planes that are landing and taking off. And so I can give my honourable friend an assurance that we will be looking at these issues very closely. I would also point out that Transport for London are currently buying a new fleet of Piccadilly line trains that in and of themselves have higher capacity. It's a larger fleet replacement programme. 10 new Elizabeth line trains are also being built. But we will look as a whole at the whole issue of how people get to and from the airport, because I agree with her that it's absolutely vital.
Manira Wills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor has staked her economic credibility and growth strategy on a third runway at Heathrow. The Secretary of State today has said that she's committed to seeing flights take off in 2035, yet at the same time she talks about taking an evidence-led approach and putting this project to her 4 tests, taking the advice of the Climate Change Committee and doing a thorough and evidence-led, doing a thorough economic and environmental impact assessment. So could she clarify for the House, because I fear my honourable friend didn't get a straight answer. If the evidence actually shows that the environmental costs are too great and the economic benefits are too little, is she, and crucially, is her Chancellor, prepared to do a U-turn and can this whole project?
Secretary of State.
We see the huge opportunity and benefit that is associated with expanding capacity at Heathrow and having a third runway there. There will be a thorough process that we are starting today in reviewing the policy framework against which any planning application would be judged. The Planning Inspectorate will look at that and consider all the issues about economic need, air quality, noise, carbon, and then a decision will be taken. We do have an ambition to see planes taking off in 2035, but that doesn't mean to say that we aren't going to be doing a thorough process. We are committed to that, and that is what I'm setting out today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's abundantly clear that air travel is here to stay. In fact, has been rising over recent years. We, of course, need to take mitigation measures to tackle the noise and environmental impacts. But while we have been debating for decades ad nauseum about building a third runway. Dozens of runways and indeed airports have been built by nations across the globe. So I asked my right honourable friend, the Transport Secretary, to safeguard the thousands of Slough households dependent on Heathrow to pay their bills, to boost business and trade, and to maintain our world-leading position in the aviation sector. Will she work at speed to tackle the blockages and finally help to deliver this third runway?
So State.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. We've had decades of dither and delay on this issue, and it is right that we crack on and start the process of reviewing the airport's national policy statement. He's also right to highlight the huge economic benefit that Heathrow, which is the single largest single-site employer anywhere in the UK, has in terms of the livelihoods and the opportunities for his constituents. We will move at speed, but we will also do this properly.
Malthouse.
Mr. Speaker, as the Secretary of State knows from her time at City Hall, Heathrow has been a planning disaster since it was accidentally sited to the west of London, forcing planes to land over millions of heads. And while it might be amusing to watch the Secretary of State take the chainsaw to all those trees planted at Sipson by a series of Labour politicians, why she would compound that planning disaster, I have no idea. But more than that, she will also, if this goes ahead, be compounding the Heathrow monopoly on long-haul flights. So to her 4 rules, can I suggest she adds a 5th, which will be the impact of direct connectivity to and from regional airports, because there's a strong view that expansion of Heathrow would kill connectivity from Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol and elsewhere.
Secretary of State.
I actually think the opposite could be true. I think an expanded Heathrow could provide greater regional connectivity. He is right to highlight that Heathrow is our only hub airport and it accounts for over 70% of long-haul flights at the moment. It also accounts for over 70% of air freight by gross value as well. So it's a really important economic asset. And I repeat what I've said to others. We will move at speed and we will look at economic growth impacts across the entire country, but where he sees challenge, I see opportunity.
Andy Beales.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for her statement today. I welcome the mention of the 4 tests that will be part of the review, but it must be said that scepticism is running high in Hillingdon, where effects are greatest, that the 4 tests need to be more transparent, and so I'd encourage her to publish very clearly what those 4 tests are, what the metrics will be against which they're assessed, and ask her for a commitment that the data, the information that will be assessed will be fully and transparently shared with communities as early as possible so it can be interrogated. And I echo colleagues' comments about the need for meaningful engagement with the communities most affected. And can she confirm that that will not just be the formal consultation on the draft statement, but there will be meaningful early engagement for communities affected?
Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, we are moving at pace on this, but I do believe it is possible to have meaningful consultation opportunities as well. If through the review that we are conducting in the next couple of months it becomes apparent that we do need to change the AMPS, we will be consulting on a new draft by the summer of next year, and I will make sure that I remain in close contact with my honourable friend, who's a fearsome advocate for his constituents, because I know that it's really important that we do address concerns not just about noise, air quality, carbon, but also demonstrate that really important economic effect that expanding Heathrow could have.
Mr. Speaker, my constituents in Esher and Walton, particularly along the river in Molesey and Dittons, are very concerned about the increase in noise pollution from a third runway at Heathrow. Noise pollution which already affects us. So how can they be reassured that their views will be taken into account, unlike the top-down centralised planning policies that this government has implemented? So will the 4 tests be both transparent, meaningful and readily available to constituents? And can I please ask again, should it be shown that the climate commitments of the UK will not be met by this expansion, will the Minister U-turn?
This is the start of the process and not the end of the process. We will be transparent. We will be clear about those 4 tests. We will consult on an amended AMPS if that is required following the review. A planning application would then come forward. There would be consultation around that. There would be a public inquiry led by the planning inspector. There will be ample opportunity for people to make their views known on this. And I refer her to the remarks that I made earlier about treating this whole process with professionalism and integrity to make sure that we make the right decision for the future of the country.
Claire Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Heathrow aircraft noise has a very significantly detrimental impact on my constituents in Putney. Similar hubs in other European countries have far fewer affected people. For Schiphol, it's 44,000, Charles de Gaulle, 133,000. But Heathrow, it's over 680,000 people are directly impacted by the noise. But currently, there's no legal noise limit. So I welcome the mentions of noise in the Minister's statement today. Will the Minister commit to a binding noise limit within the new strategy, as well as very strong environmental limits and full community consultation in this process?
Secretary of State.
I can tell my honourable friend that the current AMPS does set out very clear requirements on noise that any scheme would have to meet, and we will review those requirements alongside any necessary mitigation requirements, and we will consult on any changes. I should also say that the rules around the operation of a night flight ban, including the exact timings of such a ban, would be defined in consultation with local communities and relevant stakeholders.
Sarah Alding.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The DfT's own updated appraisal report shows that the economic benefits of a third runway are either exaggerated or misguided. The Labour government are yet to produce their economic analysis, and meanwhile Heathrow Limited are in over £15 billion worth of debt, and their own proposal has increased in cost by 50% since 2016. So what makes the Secretary of State so confident that private financing is going to be found, not just for the proposals on the table, but for all of the surface transport upgrades that are going to be required?
Secretary of State.
The 2 promoters that remain in the scheme will be responsible for securing private investment and have expressed to me confidence that this scheme can go forward. I would also gently point out to the Honourable Lady that there is huge support for this amongst the business community, whether it's the CBI, the Federation of Small Businesses, the British Chamber of Commerce. They all support Heathrow expansion, as do regional business groups from across the UK.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Environmental Audit Committee has just completed some very detailed work on aviation expansion, which we'll be announcing soon. One of the things that came across with the Climate Change Committee were advising demand management as one of the ways in which this should be delivered consistent with our environmental commitments. I'm glad that the Secretary of State has reaffirmed that it will have to be consistent with that. But she can just tell us, will demand management be a part of it? What assessment has she made about the aspects that will require government policy rather than things that are within Heathrow's gift, such as the expansion of sustainable aviation fuel and others? And finally, from her perspective, I'm glad to hear that she recognises this is a 21st century plan that has 20th century road links and 19th century rail links. Can she tell us more about how she's going to reduce the overall carbon emissions contribution that Heathrow makes in the future?
Mr. Speaker, I think there were probably 3 questions in one there. I would say this to my honourable friend. I'm not prepared to stand in the way of the public's aspiration to fly. We aren't looking at demand management at the moment, and our approach to aviation decarbonisation is one that's based on the analysis that suggests that the sector can really make a very significant contribution to our economy-wide net zero target by 2050, and that's by focusing on new fuels and new technologies.
Taylor.
I'd mentioned the naming of Heathrow as a critical national priority infrastructure is a critical thing to try and end the disruption we've seen over the summer to power and systems. So I encourage the government to go forward with that. On the plans to transport to and from the airport and associated road schemes, can the Minister confirm that Southern and Western rail access and the new Southern Access Tunnel that will ease congestion on existing roads and emissions, and the rail access to provide reliable public transport links for passengers and staff, are those costs to those projects included in the estimates that we've seen already? And again, as others have implored, can she ensure that that will be covered as part of the project and not left for the taxpayer to pick up the bill?
Secretary of State.
I am clear that this project will need to be privately financed, and that includes the core project and the associated infrastructure improvements. It will be for the promoter who submits a planning application to set out in that planning application how it is consistent with the reviewed ANPS. But I refer him to the remarks that I did make earlier. I am clear that we need to ensure that the M4 and the M25 doesn't turn into a car park, because that won't result in the successful operation of the airport.
Yeah, Philipstein.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My honourable friend knows my constituency well and will know that my constituents in Hampstead and Highgate are very concerned about air quality in London. They're very worried that the expansion of Heathrow is going to affect air quality in the constituency, especially for future generations. So could I ask my honourable friend to reassure not just me, but local organisations like Green School Runs and London Air Quality, who are campaigning hard to ensure that air quality is not impacted and also is at the heart of the review and is not ignored by the government?
Secretary of State.
Air quality will be one of the factors that is looked at through the ANPS review. Obviously, there may have been some changes in baseline conditions, given that the ultra-low emission zone is in force now compared to when the ANPS was last designated back in 2018. But we do take this issue seriously. It's why it's one of the 4 tests.
Will Falston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. About an hour ago, the Prime Minister didn't answer my cast iron guarantee, so I wonder if the Secretary of State can do a bit better. My constituency of Woking is 16 minutes from Heathrow, yet has no rail link to our country's busiest airport. Can she give me a cast iron guarantee that if this airport is expanded, that Woking will finally get the rail link it needs?
Far be it from me to give a different answer to the one which the Prime Minister gave. What I can assure him of is that we will be looking at rail in detail through the ANPS review and the public transport requirements in order to be able to have an expanded Heathrow with a 3rd runway that operates successfully.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Providing jobs for 800 people and supporting a further 7,000, East Midlands Airport is a fantastic example of how aviation powers regional growth. Does my right honourable friend agree that whether it's Heathrow expansion or East Midlands Airport, delivering sustainable expansion in aviation isn't just about flights, it's about delivering jobs, apprenticeships, growth and securing Britain's leading role as a green aerospace and aviation leader?
My honourable friend is right, and I know that East Midlands Airport plays a particularly important role when it comes to air freight as well, second only to Heathrow, and I think that's something that we don't talk enough about, given the importance to the economy, but I welcome the comments he's made.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Now, I am and always will be a proud Yorkshireman, but I lived in West London for a number of years, so I'm aware of the diverse range of views on Heathrow expansion. I certainly don't subscribe to the Luddite NIMBYism of the honourable member for Hammersmith and Chiswick. But can I ask the Secretary of State what consideration she has given to potential Chinese investment into this critical national infrastructure?
It will be for the promoters of any future scheme to secure financing for the development. I can reassure him that national security always comes first and foremost for this government, but we are keen to secure international investment so that we can boost UK competitiveness and improve global connectivity. It's central to everything we're trying to do.
Alex Smith.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. With regards to a new airports national policy statement, can the Secretary of State clarify if airports is in the plural? And if so, will she be looking to change the planning process so that it can take into account the cumulative environmental impact of different airport expansions around the country?
So State.
The review of the airport's national policy statement is site-specific for Heathrow. In terms of the other applications that I have dealt with respect to Luton and Gatwick in the last couple of months, we did so using the making best use of runways policy, but the ANPS is specific to Heathrow.
Sean Barrett.
Speaker, Britain wants to thrive, but all I can hear is this government once again prioritising the needs of the most wealthy, most frequent flyers above those of us on the ground. So can the Secretary of State tell me what crumbs of our carbon budget will remain for the rest of us in our lives after this review is complete and after the fudge on Gatwick? If the tests say no, will she say no as well?
Secretary of State.
I refer the Honourable Lady to the remarks I've made previously about carbon budgets. I would say this to her, though. I dispute the fact that it's only the wealthiest in this country that want to fly. And it may make me sad, but one of the highlights of life for me is, frankly, the bacon butty on an EasyJet flight to a Greek island in the summer. And I think that's an aspiration that is shared by a lot of the British public.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I reassure my right honourable friend that many on this side want us to get on and build, baby, build? Much of the national conversation is understandably London-centric. Can my right honourable friend assure the House that regional airports, particularly those in the West Midlands, are being considered by the government, particularly the communities and the businesses that they support?
So State.
I can assure my honourable friend that this government is ambitious for all airports across the UK, including regional airports. I was with the Chief Executive of Birmingham Airport only yesterday, and I'm really excited about their £300 million investment that they announced at the Regional Investment Summit yesterday into that airport. And just as with the expansion of Heathrow, there is huge potential for driving economic growth through our regional airports as well.
Sammy Wilson.
Mr Speaker. Whilst most of the comments today have been critical, regions across the United Kingdom need a strong hub airport, and Heathrow provides that. And I would just seek assurances from the Secretary of State that, first of all, slots at any expanded airport will be ensured for flights from regional airports, and also warn her that given the way in which the climate change targets in Northern Ireland have been used to stop major infrastructure projects such as major roads, is she confident that by sticking by the Climate Change Act here that we are not giving a weapon to those who are opposed to this project and will use the courts to ensure that they get it stopped?
Secretary of State.
The honourable gentleman is right to highlight the opportunity for other regional airports and the regional connections that an expanded Heathrow could provide. It has been operating at about 95% capacity for much of the past 2 decades. And so we are taking slot reform forward, and we will be looking closely at a range of issues to make sure that we are maximising the contribution of that process to our economy.
Jacob Collins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the Transport Secretary for her statement and recognise the national importance of this project. As she said, we must ensure that the whole of the United Kingdom benefits from this project should it go ahead, and I'm particularly keen that firms across Staffordshire and the Midlands are involved. So if she does approve this scheme, can she say how British firms will play their part in this nationally significant project?
So State.
My honourable friend is right to highlight the very significant supply chain that will exist not just in respect to the construction of a third runway at Heathrow, but in terms of the expanded airport and the opportunity that presents to the aviation sector. We will be reviewing the economic impacts through the ANPS review, and so there will be more detail available on all of that in due course.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can the Secretary of State update the House with a bit more detail on the progress of the airspace modernisation regarding to noise, as residents in my constituency in Dorset on the flight path for Bournemouth Airport have no nighttime restrictions, seeing massive increases, and in places like Dorset they're being disturbed in their homes, in their sleep. And if regional airports are not going to be included, can the Secretary of State explain when we can get something further on regional airports?
So said.
This government has moved with speed to set up the UK Airspace Design Service, and we plan to have that mobilised by the end of the year. The first region we will be looking at is London, partly to do with the connection to expansion schemes in London as well. If she wants to write to me with the details of what her constituents are experiencing, I will look into the matter further for her.
Ben Coleman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does my right honourable friend recognise the severe concerns that my constituents in Fulham will have about aspects of this proposal, particularly the noise aspects, and hence the interest they will be taking in ensuring that the 4 tests are properly adhered to? Can she reassure me that she has no intention of watering down the AMPS to lessen the noise commitments in it?
Show of State.
As I said in response to a similar question from my honourable friend, the member for Putney, we will be reviewing the noise requirements that are set out in the current MPS and the mitigations associated with that. I have no intention, as I stand here today, to diminish in any way those requirements, but we will be looking at the new technology that's associated with new aircraft and new planes, and we will be doing a thorough piece of work. If any changes are made, we will consult on that before next summer.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. As far back as 2019, there was talk of manufacturing and the logistics hubs for the Heathrow hub actually being sited in Northern Ireland. Could the Secretary of State still give that reassurance that the whole of the UK will be considered in support of the manufacture of the third runway, should it go ahead, and sites will be considered in Northern Ireland, the likes of my constituency in Southampton, which is critical to the Belfast International Airport?
Secretary of State.
One of the 4 tests relates to economic growth across the whole of the UK. And when I talk about the whole of the UK, I mean the whole of the UK, and I hope that provides him with sufficient reassurance.
Peter Swallow. We got everybody.
Yeah. My right honourable friend knows how ambitious I am for improving connectivity from Bracknell to Heathrow Airport. Heathrow's proposals say that they're exploring the option of promoting a new rail scheme that combines the objectives of a Western Rail link to Heathrow and Southern Rail access to Heathrow. There are similar commitments in the Aurora Group's plans. Will my right honourable friend make sure that the review of the ANPS helps us hold them to account for those promises so we can deliver the better surface access that my constituents so badly need?
So State.
The ANPS will provide the policy framework against which any future planning application is assessed, and as I've said to other honourable members, when a planning application comes forward, there will be a thorough consideration process associated with that before any decision is taken, and there will be clear conditions set out on any planning decision relating to surface access.
Jim Chapman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I very much welcome the Secretary of State's statement today. Our words are encouraging, positive, economic advantage for everyone, and thank you for that. The fact that Heathrow numbers look set to surpass last year numbers with 8 million passengers in August 2025 alone demonstrates, I believe, the need for an expansion is abundantly clear. Indeed, a fit-for-purpose airport can only increase revenue through tourism and connectivity for business. How can the Secretary of State ensure that the extension will secure regional airports connectivity, enhancement and a streamlined domestic service as well as international increases, and that Northern Ireland contractors can be part of the building of the new third runway? Thank you.
Secretary of State.
We are at the start of this process. I'm as ambitious for all of the UK as the honourable gentleman is, and we will be looking at the economic impact through the ANPS review, and were a scheme to come forward and get planning consent this Parliament, then I'm absolutely clear, and all government departments are, that we must make the most of this incredible economic opportunity.
Dr Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for her statement, her leadership, her focus on growth and the commitment to fit this within the Paris Agreement. Yeah. I welcome the 4 tests that this is going to be judged again, but I do have a suggestion for a 5th one,
and people might not be surprised to hear that it very much focuses on my constituency. So in recent years, Edinburgh South West has benefited from fantastic rail connections between Edinburgh and London, and also fantastic direct international flights from Edinburgh Airport to overseas. So this should agree, if this goes ahead, it can't be at the detriment to places like Edinburgh.
So stay.
My honourable friend is a fine champion for his constituency and the fantastic city of Edinburgh. I do think that an expanded Heathrow could open up more regional connectivity to cities such as Edinburgh. Of course, improving the rail network between our two capital cities is absolutely essential as well, and we're committed to doing that.
Tom Hayes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We urgently need to modernise and expand British airspace. It's at capacity and our growth depends on it. I was at Bournemouth Airport last week and we're close to a bus service and a public transport interchange, but Bournemouth Airport can't easily connect with European airspace as most traffic joins at a single space. That's particularly problematic given that I hope the Cherries, who are contesting for European football, get to play European teams next season. So will the government review and modernise our airspace and back regional airports like Bournemouth?
As I said in answer to a previous question, the work that the UK Airspace Design Service will be doing to modernise our airspace will start with the London area, but it won't be limited to the London area, but we do need to make that a priority, and I appreciate the case that he makes with respect to Bournemouth.
Final question, Lawrence Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I wish to draw attention to my chairship of the GMB parliamentary group. As someone who worked on this issue last time round, I was astonished to hear the opposition's flight of fantasy when they accused others of delay. Under their watch, the Airports Commission was artificially delayed until after a general election. 3 more years spent producing the current MPS, a further 2 years tied up in the courts. Can the Secretary of State assure the House that the lessons have been learned from those 8 wasted years?
Secretary of State.
I totally agree with my honourable friend. It wasn't just 8 wasted years, let's be honest, it was 14 wasted years. And I repeat what I said earlier, it really comes to something when the previous Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, was going to such lengths to duck these decisions that he ended up in Kabul.
Right, we now come to a